Thank you for your interest in serving as a worship computer operator. This is a vital part of the worship ministry team. I know that 99% of the time it may feel like all you're doing is pushing a button or a key at the right time, but you're not just a button pusher. You're a vital part of the worship team and a worship leader. When you sit down at the computer ready to lead in worship, ProPresenter 6 is the software that we are looking at here, and it is a professional presentation software. It's not that different from running consumer level software such as Keynote or PowerPoint that you may be familiar with, but because it has more advanced options, there are more panes, more windows, more features that are available. So just a brief overview of what you see in the main window. There are 4 panes to know about. In the top left, this window, this little pane, is a duplicate, a preview of what's projecting on the main screen. Below that is the library of documents. These are songs, worship components, scripture readings. These are the building blocks of the worship service that's created. Below that, in the bottom left, is the pane for the playlists. These playlists are comprised of documents that are drug into these playlists at the appropriate place, and that creates the worship service. And the components of the worship service are the documents that are a part of the playlist. So here we have a classic worship playlist that shows the components of that classic worship service that's been created with those documents. And then here in this praise worship service, these are the components that make up that worship service as well. The final part of the window is the 4th and largest pane where you'll spend most of your time and energy and concentration. It's the scrolling list of all the slides that comes from all the documents that make up the worship service. To advance from slide to slide, if a slide is clicked on, you can see it has an orange outline on it, and that says it was selected to send that to the screen. And in the preview in the top left, you can see that that is the content of that slide that is being sent to the main screen. One could click slide by slide, which is helpful if for some time you do have to bring a slide forward that's out of order. But for the most part, you want to go from slide to slide by hitting the space bar, which just moves you to the next slide, or the right arrow key, which of course means you can also use the left arrow key to go backwards if that was needed or necessary. When it comes to the end of a song and you move to the last slide of that song, you push the space bar or the arrow key once, and that brings up the next document, the beginning, but it doesn't fire it onto the screen. You can see here that the screen is still the last slide of the previous song. You push it a second time to then start bringing up the slides for that song. Timing is important when moving forward. You are a worship leader, as I said, and that means you are out in front of the congregation. So when you are moving from slide to slide, you move to the next, during a song, the next worship slide prior to when the congregation needs to start singing that. Often that means that you move to the next slide when you're singing about the next to the last word on the current slide. That can also mean at times there's an instrumental in the middle of a song. You can pause on the instrumental, but then you need to go to the next slide in time for when the congregation needs to begin singing those next words. Just as an example, timing may go something like this.
By mistakes that I've made, because God says of me, I am not who I was, being remade, I am new. I'm chosen and holy, as I'm dearly loved, I am new, I am
You can see how timing is important in leading the congregation into singing their music. That means that you have to focus your attention. Being a worship computer operator means you are more engaged and more focused in the worship service than perhaps even when you're sitting out in the congregation. The worship service often will have a scrolling loop at the beginning of the service. This little clock icon that's in the top of these slides, these are cues to say that those are advancing every 15 seconds automatically, moving from one slide to the next, or whatever amount of seconds that it's set for. And then also this last slide, this little return symbol means that at the end of that slide, it's going to go back to the first slide in that section. So that's a loop. So to get out of that loop, if it's in the middle of that loop, you either need to be on the last slide before you advance using the space bar or the arrow key, or you can always just scroll down and click on that first slide to get out of that loop in order to move forward. The second thing is for you to be aware of the clear buttons that are at the top left. These buttons, especially the one at the top left, clear all. This button allows you to clear whatever is on the screen. If there's a slide on the screen, it's the wrong one, it's distracting. A blank slide is better than a bad slide. That clear button is your friend. There's other ways to clear just the background image if it's the background image that's causing problems, but not clear the text. All of these have keyboard shortcuts, and those can be seen in the menus as well as you learn more about it. Well, that's really it. That's 90-something% of what you need to know to run slides for worship at the worship computer. I could say a few more things, though, just to make you more comfortable with the software in the computer, so maybe that would be helpful. If you come to the computer and ProPresenter is not yet running, first, it's always a good idea to make sure that the projectors and the displays, the wires themselves are plugged into the computer, even really before you wake up the computer, but also before you launch ProPresenter. So once those are done, you can come down on a Mac. There's a dock at the bottom of the screen, and that's where the most used apps reside. And here's ProPresenter right here. I can click on that, and that will launch ProPresenter and bring up the main window. If you ever are launching ProPresenter and the window is not showing, it could be that it is minimized in the dock. This yellow button at the top left of the screen, top left of the window, pressing that sends that window down to the dock, minimize. So here it is residing here on the right side of the dock. I click that again to bring that up to make sure that I have access to the window. In addition to that, I want you to realize that you can adjust the size of components on the screen as well. Make it yours. Set it up the way that it's most useful to you. For one, that means that you can change the relative positions between the left panes and the pane on the right. So as I drag those, it makes it larger and smaller on the left and the right. Most often, you're going to want to maximize the real estate that you have on the right-hand side of the window, because it's these slides that you are looking at the most. But then also, once you're looking at these slides, you can change the size of the slides themselves. Let's say you want to make sure you're always looking at all the slides of a song on one window. I can reduce the size of those so that they show up the smaller they are, the more that will fit on your screen. On your window as you make your way around. The other thing I want you to note about the physical appearance is there could be other kinds of panes and panels that are hiding and obscuring the slides. Down here at the bottom, this is the bay that shows where this is where the backgrounds reside, and this is what you'd look at when you're creating slides. I would drag this to make this the new background of this song as I make my way through. But if this is in your way, you don't need to be looking at that. You can hide that with this icon here at the top. If this audio pane is on the right in the way, you don't need to look at that. You can get rid of that with that audio button that's right there. There's a formatting toolbar at the top that you don't need. There's a format button to get rid of that. Also, you can make sure that your screen, your window is the largest that it can be. You can maximize that by dragging it at the bottom, or you can also use the maximize button, the green button on the window right here. You can click that, and that will make sure that the window is taking up all of the real estate. That makes it easiest for you to navigate your way through the song slides. One word about navigating through the song slides, you want to make sure that you are using the space bar or the arrow key to make your way through. The reason you're doing that is because it makes it sure that you are using the right order when you want to do that. For one, you can see in the middle of this slide, this grayed out right here, these are slides that have been disabled. They're not going to do that chorus this time around. So as you space or arrow key through those slides, it will skip those grayed out slides, and see it goes straight to the next slides. And then the other, even more important, is you want to make sure that you are not skipping the last slide of a song or the first slide of a song. If you're clicking around, you don't ever want to click from the middle of one song to the middle of the next song and then skip these slides. These are cues that do all kinds of things. So this cue, for instance, sets the background, changes the background for the next set of slides for that song. You can have cues that clear some audio that was playing before. You can have a cue that changes the formatting of the stage display, the confidence monitor that the worship leaders are looking at. You can even have cues that have been set up to change some audio sounds, but in addition to sending MIDI commands to the light board that changes the lighting scene. Super important stuff. So you want to make sure that you're not skipping those as you move your way through the worship slide. Scrolling through the songs is really easily done. If you're not familiar with how to scroll on a MacBook, you place two fingers, just rest them on the trackpad, and in sort of a natural motion, drag the screen up and down when you're hovering over the portion of the screen that you want to scroll. And also, the last thing about working on a MacBook is the volume keys for the computer are on the top right of the keyboard, just next to the power button on the top right. We like to keep the sound at about 75%. And if you're playing, for instance, a video, you'll be coordinating with your sound operator to make sure that the volume is what it needs to be. But that's where you can make sure that the volume is enough. And next to that is the mute key. If there's ever a sound coming from the computer, before you have a chance to even hit the clear button to clear the audio, you can just mute that and stop that sound from coming through. That's really all I think to make sure that you know, just to be able to operate ProPresenter as the worship computer operator. Hope it's a fun way for you to plug into participating and leading in worship on the worship team.